1, 2. Is this on? If you know what that's from, folks, that is a former wrestling theme song of Triple H. So if you're a wrestling fan, you know what that's from. But thought I'd do it because I was checking the microphone. So there you go. But anyway, we're back in Heintz Sight. It is March 17th. It is a Thursday today. And I don't know what it is. Whenever I'm gone for like a week, week and a half, 2 weeks, things like that, I always feel like there's just something missing. Something's off here. But everything's good to go. I don't know what it is. But anyway, it's a pretty nice day out today here in Pennsylvania, man. I've been away. I've been in Orlando for about a week and a half. Always a great time, man. And when I was away, we did get quite a bit of snow, but when I got back, a couple days after I heard about that, I got back, it's all melted. So I'd imagine we probably got one more day left of that, but not a too bad day today. We'll take it. We got a lot to talk about, folks, and this is something I said prior to me leaving in my last video. You guys can check it out on the channel. I said when I come back, I know there's going to be a lot to talk about. There's a lot of things to talk about with baseball and the NFL. Today, I'm strictly going to do Steeler-related news. Excuse me. My allergies have kind of been kicking in. For some reason, I have a little slight cough. So if I cough every here and there, not too often, but if I maybe if I have to step away for a second, well, then there you go. But there's been a lot of news going on the last 4 or 5 days or so, because MLB free agency yesterday, the window officially opened, but 2 days prior, that's when tampering, negotiations, all those things were able to go on. MLB, a lot of MLB news. Obviously, the lockout finally came to an end this past week. It opened up MLB free agency. It started off really slow. There's been quite a bit of moves that have been going on the last few days, which we'll definitely talk about. But today is specifically going to be, if you're a Steeler fan, you definitely want to tune in, listen to my thoughts and everything like that. If you're not, if you still want to tune in, that's awesome. If not, it's okay. But we're also going to be talking about, probably tomorrow, we'll probably be back on here. Tomorrow's Friday. So yeah, so probably tomorrow, well, for sure tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow, and we're just going to talk about things going on in the NFL and the MLB in terms of free agency frenzy, news coming out of both leagues. I'm very excited to get my teeth into it. So a lot of stuff still needs to happen and still going on, but it's been really crazy. And when it comes to sports in March, it's one of my favorite times because you have NFL free agency, you have spring training, even though it's kind of been different this year with the MLB lockout. You have MLB free agency right now. You still got NBA, NHL going on leading into the playoffs. March Madness. March is a great time for sports. It really is, even into April a little bit. So, but I'm excited to be back on here talking about it. Thank you, each and every one of you, taking the time out of your days to listen to what I got to say on here. And hopefully you guys have had a good week and everything like that. It's good to be back. And like I said, I knew when I came back, there was going to be a lot to talk about. So I'm very excited about it. But I want to just shift right into it, folks, because going this offseason for the Steelers, we didn't know what was going to happen. They've had some key free agents such as Juju, Joe Hayden, Akello Witherspoon, Terrell Edmonds. They had a couple guys that they could cut, like a Zach Banner, which they did, Joe Schobert, which they did today to save up cap room. But this offseason was the making of probably the most interesting and fun offseason in recent memory as a Steeler fan, because every year they've always been against the cap. They haven't had a lot of money to work with, always having to restructure guys, maybe make a couple cuts you don't want to make. And this year they finally have had money to work with, simply because Big Ben retiring, they have some key free agents, and even they could still make some moves to open up more money, right? But obviously with the quarterback situation was a very interesting topic for them going into free agency. The money having them to work with, this being Kevin Colbert, the GM, final NFL free agency. What were they all going to do? It was a question mark, but it made for fun discussion. And really my thought process through this was like, look, I can't sit here and tell you what they were going to do at quarterback. I thought they were the most unpredictable team at quarterback. But I thought they were still going to make moves. Now, I wasn't really quite sure how aggressive they were going to be because we know the Steelers' MO when it comes to free agency. They don't usually just go out and make splash plays, but they usually kind of test the market out. They'll bring in some solid guys on good deals, things like that. So I wasn't necessarily sure who they were going to nail down with the money they have. But with that being said, now that we're about 4 days in, and we've already seen the approach they've taken, what they've done, I'm going to sit here and tell you, folks, this is an A-plus offseason from this team. And this isn't me saying this as a Steeler fan. If I'm an outsider looking in, I would still praise their offseason. Really. Their offseason approach, they don't rebuild, folks. They're a team, they're a team that doesn't rebuild. They don't. Ever since Big Ben was drafted, the Steelers were always in competition. They were always competitive. They never finished under 500. And now where they're sitting now, with Big Ben retiring, they're still reloading their team. And I'll get a little deeper into that. But their approach alone this offseason, what they've done, I mean, this is what they do. They have the mindset of winning, chasing championships, building a competitive, contending team. Even when their franchise quarterback retires, they're not one of those franchises where once their franchise quarterback leaves or retires, they tear it down like Seattle or something like that. They still continue with the same mindset. That's just how they are as a franchise. And as a fan, you love it. You really do. You have those franchises in the NFL who are, You have those franchises in the NFL who are cream of the crop, right? You look at the Steelers, you look at San Francisco, Green Bay, New England you can probably put in there. And you can throw some other teams. I mean, I think the Ravens are a great franchise. I think they have a lot of good structure. I can add some... Gosh, darn it. Damn it. I can add some other teams in there in the sense when I'm not naming the best franchises in the league. I'm naming just the top franchises when it comes to cream of the crop of structure, stability, right? Green Bay, Steelers, San Francisco's always kind of had that, I feel like. Baltimore, Kansas City is late, New England. I can probably throw a few more in there. And then you got franchises who are good franchises, but they don't always have that sustainability, right? Good franchises, pretty well ran. Whenever it gets to a point, maybe they have to kind of rebuild a little bit. They'll do that, but they're still a solid franchise all around. And then you just got franchises who are piss poor, can never develop anybody, things like that. So I'm grateful to be a Steeler fan. I always have been, simply because our structure, our ownership. I mean, one of the greatest sport franchises of all time, quite simply. But going this offseason, it was definitely very interesting. I knew it was going to be a lot of fun. I knew the Steelers were going to go to approaches like they're not, just because Big Ben's retired and they lost in the first round of the playoffs, stuff like that, they're not just going to not do anything. Like, I knew they were still going to go with the approach of still aiming at being competitive, right? Might have to enter a little bit of a transition period, kind of retool, but still keep that competitive mindset. And that's like what they're doing, but like they're not, how do I want to word this? Like, their approach with this offseason hasn't changed from where they've been the last 18 years with Big Ben. You know, it's still winning games, being competitive. The structure, right? Their MO, the way they do things. But they've been doing, even though this offseason, like, yeah, you can look at it, and it's like, yeah, they stick to kind of the roots, but they're being a lot more aggressive, right, than what they've kind of been. So I'm very happy with how their offseason has gone. And like I said, I knew they were going to approach it in the sense of like still wanting to stay as a competitive team. They'll have to do a little transition period, obviously, with the quarterback situation, but that's just the way they do business. So going to the offseason, or really, let's say, X amount of days ago. So we know the quarterback situation. They signed Mitch Trubisky. Mitch Trubisky, I know, was a name thrown out there into the offseason in the sense of he could be an option for them. How I felt about that was like I wasn't really too keen in on it. He wasn't my option 1 through 5. I obviously was all for an Aaron, a Russell. Obviously, the Deshaun Watson stuff going on was something to keep an eye on. A Jameis. But when the signing happened, I was kind of torn because I was looking at things, positives from it. I was also looking at the other side and where I stand with it. I think more fans than not are okay with the signing simply because of where they're at with their quarterback situation. When your franchise quarterback finally retires, really most of the time you have to enter a transition period of where you can find somebody that can be a stopgap guy until you find your next franchise guy. And that's what Mitch Trubisky is. Mitch Trubisky, he's not some scrub on the sideline, something like that. I mean, he's started for Chicago for 4 years, has had a winning record with them, was to the playoffs twice, kind of up and down, some of it his fault, some of it wasn't that great of a situation, didn't have a ton to work with anyway. But as I was kind of sitting there thinking about it, I was like, this is kind of in the same realm of a Jameis, right? But Mitch Trubisky brings athleticism, he brings mobility to the quarterback position, which is the wave of the NFL, which Mike Tomlin has so many times said is important. He's started 4 seasons, he's a former second overall pick. And like I said, he wasn't in that great of a situation with Chicago. Sat for a year in Buffalo under Josh Allen, under Brian DeBall. And then comes to an organization with the Steelers who has great coaching. He's got a lot more to work with than what he did in Chicago. And sometimes that's what players need. Sometimes for players, every player adapts different. Sometimes they hit it off right at the bat. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to adjust. Then you do. Sometimes it's the system you're in, the fit. Or sometimes you're just ass. It's just how it is. So we don't know how good Trubisky's going to be, but for their current situation they're in, he's still a guy that can keep them competitive. He's a guy that can throw on the run. He's a guy that brings that mobility, athletic factor to the quarterback spot that they haven't had, that they've been wanting. He has a better offensive line in front of him with the Steelers in terms of them upgrading the interior offensive line this offseason. He's got a guy like Harris, Deontay Johnson, possibly Juju coming back, Chase Claypool, Pat Freiermuth. He's got guys to work with, man. I mean, the Steelers have a good, talented receiving core. And then he's also got a great defense on the other side of the ball with them. Great coaching. So when you look at all those things, it can definitely benefit him. But time will tell in the sense of how he's grown, sitting for a year, learning, ultimately how good he is. Is Mitch Trubisky the future? Probably not. If he ends up being that, then that's great. But probably not. I could still see them drafting a quarterback, Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis in this draft, let him sit for a little bit, and go from there. They could even draft a quarterback next year. But Trubisky is at least a guy, kind of like I said with the Jameis Winston, that can still keep you in the mix, keep you competitive, right? Brings an element to the offense that hasn't been there the last few years. And Matt Canada, with what he runs to run in the offense, Trubisky fits that a lot better, but time will tell how well that does. So, as I've sat there, I'm not going to sit here and say it's an A signing, but I think it's an above-average signing in the sense of where they're at. It could have been a lot worse. When you also look at what they've done in free agency, I'll talk about the re-signings in a bit, but guys outside the organization. Bringing in James Daniels, the guard from Chicago, 24 years old. I believe he's a former second-round pick. He's been a very solid stronghold for them at guard in the interior offensive line. He can also play center. He's pretty versatile. But, man, that was somebody who, he was definitely one of the top interior offensive linemen on the market. And definitely somebody I know a lot of Steelers fans were advocating for. And the Steelers got him on a 3-year, about $28 million deal or so. Great signing. I still think it's my favorite signing currently. It's an easy upgrade over what they currently had. Last year going in the season, Dan Moore, Kevin Dotson, but he did get hurt and missed a lot of the season. Kendrick Green at center, Trey Turner at guard, and Chuck Okorafor at tackle. The offensive line was terrible last year. Bringing a guy like James Daniels is going to bring such a stronghold to that. He's, I think, somebody who has Pro Bowl caliber potential. Only 24 years old. He fits their scheme great. And when I saw this out, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. So you're going to plug him in there at guard. That's already an instant upgrade over your interior offensive line, over Trey Turner, over Kendrick Green. Then they signed Mason Cole. Mason Cole, he has quite a bit of starts under his belt. He was with Arizona for a little bit, traded to Minnesota, I believe, last year. He dominated the Steelers when they played them last year. He's a guy that can play some center, can play some guard. He'll probably come in, have that competition. They signed him to a 3-year, $15 million deal. If he's a starter, great. If not, it's still a good price in the sense of being your next guy in that offensive line group. If they want to play him as a swing guy, I don't really know. But I think he's probably projected to be a starting center for them this year. It seems like he's very strong in run blocking, which is what the Steelers have very mightily needed. But I think what the Steelers saw him do against them with Minnesota, looking at his tape last year when he joined the Vikings, pretty strong tape there, I think, from all things considered. Sure, he's not some top guy or anything like that, but he does bring an upgrade. He does bring a little flexibility for what they can do with their offensive line. I was fine with that signing. As you're looking at it right now, your offensive line is Dan Moore, Kevin Dotson, Mason Cole, James Daniels, and Chuck Okorafor. Kendrick Green is still there. He'll probably be in a little competition in the offseason. They can still obviously bring in some depth. I'm sure they'll probably draft an offensive lineman early as well, maybe second, third round. I still think they could probably do that. I don't see them going it in the first. But it's looking at that is already an instant upgrade. Kendrick Green was not good at center last year. Trey Turner and Okorafor at right tackle. He's not a great center, but he's still only 24. He only gave up 2 sacks. Now, he was penalized 11 times, which I believe was the most penalized either tackle or right tackle in the NFL. But he's still growing. He's still learning. And when I saw them extend him, I was like, that's a pretty hefty contract when they gave him a 3-year, $29 million deal. But when you look at the structure, he's only getting, in terms of cap hit, they structured it where the cap hit's only $4 million this year. And it's kind of a prove-it year. If he can sustain that side, well, then he's under contract a couple more years and he's getting paid fairly well. If not, well, then they can probably find somebody else. But Okorafor, he's kind of just been average right now. But if he can develop and grow and kind of jump off of how last year was, he did pretty good with pass protection. But if he can clean up some of those penalties, get a little bit better in the sense of not allowing that pressure to happen, he can definitely turn into something. Dan Moore had some rookie pains early on. Down the stretch, he was very solid. Kevin Dotson had a great rookie year, was injured last year. You bring in, like I said, Mason Cole, James Daniels, who's an absolute baller, Pro Bowl caliber potential. That's what you want to see. Also, going into free agency, they signed Levi Wallace, cornerback from Buffalo. When I saw this, I thought this was great. 2 years, $8 million deal. Ever since he joined the Buffalo Bills as an undrafted rookie, the last 4 years, he's been cornerback number 2. He's been a solid corner. He's a great tackler. He's not afraid to get his nose his nose in there. He's not a cornerback 1 or anything like that, but he's got great technique. He's a great he's a great player to coach from all things that I've read, and he's already going to be a guy on the outside for you. Young guy, I believe he's 25, 26 years old now. He held down cornerback 2 for Buffalo. A lot of Buffalo fans loved him. Buffalo loved him. But definitely a great signing for the Steelers, hopping on that and him coming here to be a part of that secondary. That's great. That's what you want to see. That's an A signing for me, 100%. Now, they also, which was probably the biggest signing of the free agency period, they signed Miles Jack last night to a 2-year, $16 million deal. Miles Jack was cut from the Jacksonville Jaguars, inside linebacker. He actually had a pick against Big Ben in the Steelers playoff game in 2017. He only had a 3.6% of a missed tackle rate last year, which I believe was top 5 and ranked amongst linebackers. He's a great tackler. He's a beast, very athletic, a playmaker, and that's what they needed there. Because when you look at last year, Devin Bush did not have a good year last year. Devin Bush had a really good rookie year. He was off to a good start his second year till he blew out his knee. And last year, he did not have a good year. Some of that could be entitled to him getting back to shape. Then they last year trade for Joe Schobert. Joe Schobert wasn't really anything impressive at all, but I think it was, considering the fact he wasn't really that good, and that he carries a $9 million cap hit. I think it was realistic to see they were probably going to release him, which they did today. But when Miles Jack was released on the market, it was reported the Steelers already had immediate interest, and they brought him in. They brought him in last night, which is just absolutely awesome. It's definitely an offseason that I wasn't expecting the sense of the aggressiveness. I was expecting an offseason. Yes, I know that they would make some probably solid moves, but might wait it out. But this offseason's been aggressive. I mean, they haven't really done anything in the sense of giving somebody like a huge-ass contract, like that splash contract. But they've made some pretty good splash plays in a free agency that I think a lot of us probably didn't really expect them to do. So I think their free agency has been an A-plus free agency so far, upgrading the interior offensive line. You're getting better in the secondary. You upgrade at inside linebacker with Miles Jack, and this should benefit Devin Bush. You bring in a guy like Miles Jack, who's kind of a veteran guy already. He's only 26, and then you also have Brian Flores as well. If Devin Bush can't feed off of Miles Jack, and if he cannot develop better working under a Brian Flores type, I mean, he just might not be that good, right? Hopefully that this is a good thing for Devin Bush. But when you look at the Steelers' defense right now, Stephon Tuitt coming back, which it's reported he's supposed to. Tyson Alualu being back. Those two guys alone, not having either one of them last year, easily hurt the run defense. Cam Hayward, all-pro guy. TJ Watt, Alex Smith, Miles Jack, Devin Bush, Levi Wallace, Cam Sutton. They did, about half an hour ago, re-sign Akello Witherspoon. That probably, I would imagine, marks the end of Joe Hayden era here in Pittsburgh, but Akello Witherspoon was a great player down the stretch for them. Definitely their best cornerback down the stretch. Bring him back, and then Minka, and then we'll see what happens at the other safety spot. A lot of people want Tyrann Mathieu. They could bring back Terrell Edmonds. We'll see. But the Steelers defense, best defense in 2019. Top 3 defense 2020. Last year was very underwhelming. They had some injuries, but it was just very disappointing. They're looking great. And you just hope that they can solid up that run game. You got a little bit better in the secondary. Here's what I'm going to say. The Steelers team right now is a much better team than where they were a year ago. Much better team a year ago. The way that we're looking at the Steelers right now, and like I said, going into the offseason, I knew that they were still going to keep that approach of being competitive next year. Not, just because Big Ben retired, they weren't just not going to do anything and just freaking tank. Like, they don't do that. They don't do that. They're not one of those franchises that do that, which I do love. At the same time, in terms of being able to find your next guy, sometimes you got to be bad, but then, hey, if you're not, trade up and go get somebody. Simple as that. But I think you already have an upgrade offensive line. You already make the move, you upgrade the O-line. You're more athletic at quarterback. We don't know how good Trubisky will be here, but there's certain boxes you can check in the sense of what you want in terms of being that stopgap guy. Talent on the offensive weapons. Defense, I think the defense got better than what it is last year, 100%, especially with Tuitt coming back, Alu, and obviously the signings. I'm very excited. I think every Steeler fan is excited in the sense of the moves they have made. This team will obviously be competitive. I'm not going to sit here and say this is a Super Bowl team. I don't really think that's fair to say right now in the sense of when you look at some of the other teams in the AFC, they're not better than Buffalo or Kansas City. Chargers are making a big leap with some of the things they've done. But the way the Steelers are right now and with what they've done in this free agency, they can definitely compete in the AFC North, be right up there with a Cincinnati, a Baltimore. And yes, quarterback play matters. We'll see what happens. But with where they sit currently, they're definitely a team that defensively will ball out. Offense, you hope Trubisky can at least do enough. But they'll definitely be competitive. They'll be in the mix. They're definitely a team that can be a playoff caliber team 100% with what they've done. They'll compete in the AFC North with the other teams. This is just what they do, man. They don't rebuild. They don't. Like I said, there's a lot of franchises in the NFL that are pretty solid franchises, but when they got to rebuild, they'll do that. You look at Seattle, right? Seattle's one of those franchises where it's like, once they get to where they need to be, they have good sustainability, but then once it's kind of over, okay, they're going to start from scratch, right? There's a handful of franchises that are like that. There's not many franchises in the NFL where they always keep that mindset of winning and being competitive, stuff like that, and that's the way the Steelers are. It's the way the Steelers are. And there's a few I think I can say that as well that keep that mindset, but sorry about that. But I'm very excited, man. And A+ offseason. I wanted to come on here and just kind of talk about those things. But I think my favorite signing is James Daniels. I think the best signing is obviously Myles Jack. And I felt like when Myles Jack, when it was reported that Jags were releasing him, I was like, look. And when I saw the Steelers were interested, I'm like, the Steelers are the best fit for him, man. You know? And I know some people wanted Bobby Wagner, but Bobby Wagner is a beast in himself. But Myles Jack, he's 26 years old. He's had a great tenure with Jacksonville. He's entering a better situation, playing with a bunch of playmakers on that defense, man. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. And I'm very excited. It's going to be great. I'm very excited to see what the future holds for this defense, for the guys coming in. And the Steelers, I got to give a lot of credit, man. Omar Khan is in the running to be the next Steelers general manager. Omar Khan, I believe, has been with the team since 2002. I might be wrong on that, but a very long time, shadowing Kevin Colbert, being there. But Omar Khan's been the guy kind of structuring these contracts. And the Steelers entered free agency with $29 million in cap. They made a couple moves to obviously cutting Zach Banner, Joe Schobert. Obviously creates more room of that. But they've been structuring these contracts when they re-signed Okorafor, when they brought in James Daniels, Mitch Trubisky. These contracts, they've been structuring them in the sense of that gives them leverage and more money to work with in this offseason. So that's a huge plus. You know, get the guys you want in this offseason. It gives you that leverage to work with going into next year. Sure, some of those guys will have higher cap hits, but that's the way they've been structuring that. Being able to work with it, leverage it. Now, I know the cap situation in the NFL is honestly a joke. It's real to an extent. At the same time, there's so many ways to work around it. Like the Saints were like negative $70 million over the cap, and now they're fine. So like, there's so many different ways around the cap to get yourself in a better situation, to get yourself under it. And so with what the Steelers have been doing, they haven't restructured contracts yet, but structuring these signings in the sense of like, where it's not a big cap hit this year, so they can have more leverage, that's great. That's great, quite simply. So when you look at the current state, I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see how these things pan out, but they're looking strong. To me, I think they're a better team than where they were last year. I think they'll team that'll be in the mix and be competitive. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see the rest of this free agency. I'm hoping they bring Juju back because, yes, I love Juju, but I think he brings a great element to the offense that it doesn't have. And even though they bring him back, they can still draft a wide receiver in the second or third round. It's a good receiver class among those lines. So I'm excited to see what goes on. I would expect them. I mean, I'd still like to see a second running back sign in free agency. They'll obviously do some depth signings, but I think the safety position right now, Edmonds, Honey Badger, somebody else out there. We'll see what happens there, but I just want to get on here, just kind of talk about the moves, kind of give my thoughts and everything like that in the sense of, my thoughts on their free agency so far, how these guys are going to fit. To be honest with you, man, every signing they've made so far, I love it. In the sense of re-signing Kella Witherspoon was great. With Levi Wallace signing, it kind of gave the question, okay, is Witherspoon going to be gone? Because a few days ago it was a lock he was going to be back, then we weren't hearing anything, but he re-signs today. Okorafor re-signing, that's fine, especially with the structure of the contract. Who am I missing here? That they re-signed. Obviously, they re-signed Miles Killebrew. They re-signed Montravius Adams in the sense of being a depth guy, defensive tackle. He stepped in. Montravius Adams stepped in fairly well for Alu last year, and he brings athleticism and speed to that position. Killebrew, obviously a great special teams guy. I feel like I'm missing somebody. Witherspoon. Okorafor. Yeah, I think in the sense of re-signings, that's kind of what they've done so far. But I'm definitely going to miss Joe Hayden. I wish Joe Hayden all the best, man. Joe Hayden had a great 5-year tenure here, turned himself around here. Great guy. Brought a lot of things to secondary. He's going to be 32, and the Steelers just want to keep getting younger on defense. That's just the way it goes. But there will be a team out there for him that does give him a contract and where he can do well in. I'll always be rooting for him and supporting him all the way through. But we're getting into there, folks. We're a half hour in. NFL free agency has been wild. We'll be back here tomorrow to talk about the rest of the signings in the NFL, all the news coming out of the NFL and the MLB. I'm very excited about it. We will be back tomorrow. But thank you, each and every one of you, for tuning in, kind of listen to my thoughts on Steelers free agency, what I think about it. Very excited. Let's keep it rolling, guys. I'm very excited to see the rest of NFL free agency and what we're going to be getting ourselves into. So, in the meantime, we will see you tomorrow. And follow me on Twitter, Nate_Heintz, Nathan_Heintz on Instagram, Facebook in Heintz Sight to keep up with things of the channel, to interact with me, whatever it is. Hit the subscribe and the thumbs up, guys, because it helps out the channel. I just want to keep reaching sport fans. We're just going to keep trying to grow this one day at a time. But thank you, each and every one of you, for your support, and we will see you tomorrow. All right, everybody. Take care.